the Russia-Ukraine conflict seems to have fallen into an inextricable deadlock, which disappointed President Trump, who actively mediated and tried to end the war. In April 2025, President Trump's team drafted a final peace plan, which included core elements such as the United States legally recognizing Russia's control over Crimea, the United States de facto recognition of Russia's occupation of almost the entire Luhansk, as well as parts of Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhzhia. The United States has determined that Ukraine will not join NATO, but has hinted that Ukraine may become a part of the European Union. The United States lifts sanctions imposed on Russia since 2014. The United States strengthens economic cooperation with Ukraine, especially in the fields of energy and industry. Ukraine will receive strong and effective security guarantees. A small part of the Kharkiv region occupied by the Russian army will be returned to Ukraine. The Dnieper River, which flows through parts of southern Ukraine's front line, will remain unobstructed. Ukraine can receive compensation and assistance for reconstruction. The Zaporizhzhia Nuclear Power Plant will be considered Ukrainian territory, but operated by the United States and supplying power to both Ukraine and Russia. After this plan was proposed, it caused a huge uproar. This plan has sparked strong opposition from Ukraine, with Ukrainian President Zelensky stating that he cannot accept it. His statement has greatly angered President Trump, who is striving to end the war. He publicly accused Zelensky, refused to recognize Crimea as belonging to Russia, which was very harmful to peace negotiations, and mocked Zelensky as having no cards to play. But President Trump still left the choice to Zelensky, with the option of either choosing peace and letting the war end quickly, or choosing to fight for another 3 years until the entire country is lost. Vice President Vance of the United States also threatened to give up mediating the Russia-Ukraine conflict. He said that the United States had sent a very clear proposal to Russia and Ukraine. But the two sides either agreed or the United States withdrew from the mediation process. These tough statements are equivalent to issuing an ultimatum to Ukraine. But Ukrainian President Zelensky still made it clear that Ukraine will not legally recognize Russia's occupation of Crimea, which violates Ukraine's constitution. On social media, Zelensky reposted former U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo's 2018 statement, which refused to recognize Russia's occupation of Crimea. Zelensky's actions are equivalent to a demonstration. From a legal perspective, if Ukraine recognizes Crimea as belonging to Russia, it will completely lose the legal basis for reclaiming Crimea. This not only seriously damages Ukraine's national sovereignty and territorial integrity, but also triggers strong dissatisfaction among the domestic population and may even lead to political instability. For a long time, Ukraine has regarded Crimea as an integral part of it, and the Crimean issue is highly sensitive and important within Ukraine. Since the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the Ukrainian economy has suffered a heavy blow. Years of war have caused extensive damage to Ukraine's infrastructure, stagnant industrial production, severe damage to agriculture, and continuously expanding fiscal deficits. If further territorial concessions are made, Ukraine's economic situation will become even more severe, and its position in the international community will also be seriously affected. However, Ukraine is not completely independent and autonomous on the international stage. In the conflict, Ukraine heavily relies on military and economic assistance from the United States and European countries. Faced with the changing attitude of the United States, Ukraine is caught in a dilemma. On the one hand, if it rejects the U.S. peace plan, it may lead to the U.S. cutting off its aid to Ukraine, putting greater pressure on Ukraine's military and economy, and even putting it in a more disadvantageous situation on the battlefield. On the other hand, if this plan is accepted, Ukraine will lose a large part of its territory, its national sovereignty and dignity will be seriously trampled upon, and its future development will also be severely constrained. At the London talks on April 23, 2025, U.S. Secretary of State Rubio and U.S. Middle East envoy Witkoff decided not to attend the meeting in London due to Ukraine's refusal to accept its peace plan. During his visit to India, U.S. Vice President Vance made a clear threat, demanding that Ukraine make a choice between accepting a peace plan or letting go of the U.S. This series of actions has made Ukraine's situation increasingly difficult, but Zelensky still insists on his position. the Ukraine talks held in London were downgraded due to the absence of the United States. But on the European side, Britain and France have always hoped to bridge the differences between the United States and Ukraine and promote progress in peace negotiations. In the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Europe has always been one of the main affected areas. The influx of a large number of Ukrainian refugees into Europe has brought tremendous pressure to the economy, society, and politics of Europe. At the same time, Europe's energy supply has also been seriously affected by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. European countries urgently hope that the conflict can be ended at an early date to restore regional peace and stability. European countries originally hoped to promote the progress of negotiations in the London talks through a Europe plus America approach, but the absence of the United States lowered the level of the talks and greatly reduced their effectiveness. This also reflects that in the process of resolving the Russia-Ukraine conflict, European countries have relatively limited power and are difficult to play a greater role without the support of the United States. Crimea issue is one of the cores of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and its attribution has been controversial for a long time. From a historical perspective, since Soviet leader Khrushchev transferred the Crimean Peninsula from Russia to Ukraine in 1954, Crimea has always been a shared historical memory and a focus of current disputes between Russia and Ukraine. Although the 2014 national referendum declared Crimea's return to Russia with a 96.77% approval rating, it was determined at the United Nations General Assembly that the referendum violated the Ukrainian constitution and international law with an absolute majority of 100 votes in favor and 11 votes against. From a geopolitical perspective, Crimea holds extremely important strategic significance for Russia. Crimea has important ports and military facilities, and is a crucial pivot for Russia in the Black Sea region. By controlling Crimea, Russia can effectively control the sea lanes of the Black Sea, ensuring its military presence and economic interests in the region. In addition, Crimea also has abundant natural resources such as oil and natural gas, which have important economic value for Russia, which mainly relies on energy exports. For Ukraine, Crimea is not only a strategic hub, but also a symbol of national sentiment. In history, Crimea has long belonged to Ukraine, and Ukraine has a deep historical and cultural attachment to it. However, the reality is that the Russian military has been operating in Crimea for many years, and Ukraine faces many difficulties in reclaiming the region. Militarily, Russia has deployed a large number of troops and advanced weapons and equipment in Crimea, making it difficult for Ukraine's current military forces to compete with them. In terms of economy, reclaiming Crimea requires significant economic costs, including rebuilding infrastructure and restoring economic order. In terms of culture, after years of Russian rule, the cultural identity of the Crimean region has changed, which has also increased the difficulty for Ukraine to reclaim Crimea. In the future, there are many possibilities for the trend of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. If Ukraine ultimately compromises under external pressure and recognizes Crimea as part of Russia, it will face many domestic political and economic challenges. Domestic citizens may have strong dissatisfaction with the government's compromised behavior, leading to political turmoil and social instability. In terms of economy, Ukraine will lose Crimea, an important economic region, and its economic development will be severely constrained. If the peace negotiations continue to be deadlocked, the conflict may escalate further, leading to more casualties and economic damage. This will not only cause greater harm to Russia and Ukraine, but also have a negative impact on regional and global security and stability. The international community will face greater pressure and need to invest more resources to address the various issues brought about by this conflict. In this context, the international community should actively play a role in promoting dialogue and consultation among all parties to resolve disputes. Firstly, respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all countries is a fundamental prerequisite for resolving disputes. Any attempt to change borders through force or other non-peaceful means should be condemned and stopped. Secondly, the interests and concerns of all parties should be fully considered, and a balanced solution should be sought, rather than simply favoring one party. In the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia's security concerns and Ukraine's sovereign territorial integrity should be properly addressed. At the same time, attention should be paid to Europe's security needs and global peace and stability. In addition, the international community should also strengthen mediation efforts in the Russia-Ukraine conflict and promote the establishment of a fair, just, and lasting peace mechanism. The United Nations and other international organizations should play a greater role in ensuring the implementation of peace agreements and the long-term stability of conflicts through dispatching peacekeeping forces, organizing international supervision, and other means. In order to achieve the peaceful settlement of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the following suggestions are feasible. Firstly, promote multilateral diplomatic consultations. We need to establish a multilateral consultation mechanism led by the United Nations and involving all parties including Russia, Ukraine, the United States, and Europe. In this mechanism, all parties can engage in equal dialogue, fully express their demands and concerns, and jointly explore solutions. Multilateral diplomatic consultations can avoid direct confrontation between major powers, reduce the risk of conflict escalation, and create a favorable external environment for the peaceful resolution of disputes. Secondly, introduce third-party mediation. Invite third-party countries or international organizations with neutral status and rich mediation experience to participate in mediation. For example, as a major power with important influence in the international community, China has always advocated the settlement of the Russia-Ukraine conflict through peaceful negotiations and has proposed its own peace plan. China can play a more active role in the mediation of the Russia-Ukraine conflict and use its good relations with Russia and Ukraine to promote the two sides to reach consensus and achieve peace. Thirdly, strengthen economic cooperation and assistance. Economic interests are one of the important factors that affect decision-making among all parties. The international community can increase its economic assistance to Ukraine to help it recover its economy, improve people's livelihoods, and enhance Ukraine's confidence in negotiations. At the same time, economic cooperation can also be used to promote economic ties and interdependence between Russia and Ukraine, creating an economic foundation for achieving peace. For example, carrying out cooperative projects in the fields of energy, trade, infrastructure construction, etc., so that both parties can benefit from them, thereby reducing the motivation for conflict. Fourth, ensure humanitarian needs are met. During the ongoing conflict, it is important to always pay attention to humanitarian issues and ensure the safety and basic rights of civilians. Intensify assistance to Ukrainian refugees by providing food, shelter, medical care, and other forms of aid. At the same time, it is necessary to promote the compliance of both Russia and Ukraine with international humanitarian law, avoid attacks and harm to civilian targets, and create a good humanitarian atmosphere for peace negotiations. Carry out people-to-people exchanges and dialogues. Encourage people-to-people exchanges and dialogue between Russia and Ukraine, and enhance understanding and friendship between the two peoples. Through cultural exchange, educational cooperation, and mutual visits between people, misunderstandings and prejudices can be eliminated, and national emotions and oppositional attitudes can be alleviated. Civil exchanges can provide public support and social foundation for official negotiations, and in the long run, contribute to the normalization of bilateral relations and regional peace and stability. In short, the peaceful settlement of the Russia-Ukraine conflict requires the joint efforts and wisdom of all parties. Only through equal dialogue, mutual agreement, and international cooperation can regional peace and stability be achieved, more innocent lives be avoided, and favorable conditions be created for global peace and development. In the future, despite many difficulties and challenges, as long as the international community adheres to a just, objective and constructive attitude and actively takes effective measures, the peaceful settlement of the Russia-Ukraine conflict is still full of hope. The wheels of history roll forward, and behind every conflict lies profound lessons. The tragedy in Ukraine reminds the world that the cost of war is heavy, and the preciousness of peace cannot be described in words. All countries should learn from the Russia-Ukraine conflict, cherish and maintain peace, and jointly build a more harmonious, stable, and prosperous world. Let us join hands and work tirelessly towards achieving this goal. Welcome to subscribe to my channel, where I share in-depth perspectives with you every day. See you next time.